God has always sought to dwell among His created ones. Even in Eden, before his sin entered the picture, Jehovah created man to have fellowship with Him. But how does a fallible, willful man live in community with a holy God? This is the topic of Solomon's prayer at the dedication of the temple in 1 Kings chapter 8, beginning in verse 23. Like the tabernacle of the previous generation, the temple was a structure that was dedicated to housing the divine presence. And in the prelude to Solomon's prayer, he acknowledges that even the heavens cannot contain such a big God, let alone the little house that he commissioned. And yet, it pleased God to have such a place to dwell with a people that were to be transformed by His presence with them, so that they would be a light to the nations, a shining city on a hill. There have always been conditions that made this close fellowship between God and man plausible. First, in Solomon's prayer, he's acutely aware of the covenant relationship that the Lord had with David and the people of Israel, and of God's faithfulness to that covenant. Without God's faithfulness, there could be no fellowship with the people through the temple. Second, he is also aware of the need for God to forgive the people's sins, iniquities, and transgressions, and to confess these openly before Him. Third, he is aware of the centrality of the temple as the direction people should look in order to look upon God and receive mercy. Several times throughout the prayer, he asks that this house be a structure that people could look to even from foreign lands and pray towards in order to receive God's forgiveness and blessing. Now consider that God has a covenant people, children of Abraham, who still bear His covenant promises. As Paul wrote to the Galatians, "And if you are Christ's, then you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to the promise." And as God's covenant people, Christians become and have charge to maintain the temple of God. "Do you not know," Paul said, "that you are God's temple, and that God's Spirit dwells in you?" So, just as the Spirit of God occupied the temple of Solomon upon its dedication, the Spirit of God occupies us, His temple. We must therefore glorify God in our bodies, so that those who look upon us may find a pathway to spiritual healing, forgiveness, and grace from the Father. And this is our prayer today, that God may be glorified in His temple, and that all those who sin may look in its direction to find forgiveness, solace, and communion with God. When we act as God's emissaries to the world, we are doing the work of Christ, who is the ultimate temple and way to God.